Title: The Billionaire Who Called a Handyman and Found the Only Man Who Never Bowed to Her. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories about single fathers who never gave up, powerful women who finally found someone real, and love that refuses to break under pressure, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from right now. I read every single one, and it means the world to know how far this story has traveled. Stay with me until the very end, because what starts as a broken circuit in a billionaire's mansion turns into the kind of love story that rewrites two lives forever. Now, let's begin. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning, 3 minutes before Daniel Reeves wanted it to, and he killed the sound before the second buzz because Sophie was still asleep in the next room and she had school in 3 hours, and he would rather lose sleep than lose the soft snoring coming through the thin wall. He sat up on the edge of the pull-out couch that he had been sleeping on for 2 years and 4 months, and he rubbed his palms down his face the way a man rubs something he is trying to remember. The apartment smelled like last night's coffee and the faint chemical residue of the soldering iron he had been using on a neighbor's microwave at 11 p.m. Cash job, $30, and he had needed every cent of it. The heater had kicked out again. He could tell before he even stood up because the air in the room had that flat, cold quality, the kind of cold that doesn't bite but just leans on you. He patted across the carpet in socks and checked the thermostat. 49 degrees. He tapped the plastic casing with his knuckle, the way superstitious people tap wood, and then he knelt down by the baseboard unit and popped the panel off with a screwdriver he kept tucked behind the television. 5 minutes later, the heater was running. He did not know what he had done exactly. He had jiggled a wire, cleaned a contact, and whispered one quiet thing to the machine that no one would ever hear. That was his rhythm. That was how he had lived since Sarah died. You fix the thing in front of you, and then you fix the next thing, and you do not stop, and you do not sit down, because if you sit down, you start thinking, and thinking was the enemy. He made coffee. Instant, because he had been out of ground beans for a week and had not wanted to spend the money. He poured a bowl of cereal for himself and did not eat it, because he was saving the milk for Sophie. He would eat the cereal dry later if he remembered to eat it all. At 5:30, his phone buzzed on the counter, a number he did not recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail because calls at that hour were either wrong numbers or collections, but something about the way the screen lit up in the dark made him pick it up. "This is Reeves." "Mr. Reeves, my name is Harold Kent. I'm the estate manager for Ms. Elena Voss." Daniel waited. The name landed somewhere in the back of his head the way a stone lands in deep water, recognizable but distant. Elena Voss. Voss Holdings. He had seen her on the cover of something at the grocery checkout last month, some magazine about the youngest something of something or other, 31 years old, worth more money than Daniel could conceptualize. "Okay," Daniel said, "we have a situation at the property. The entire environmental system has failed. Climate, lighting, security, all of it is tied into a single integrated network, and the network is down. Our usual contractor is currently in Zurich and cannot be reached. We need someone within the hour." "Within the hour?" "Yes." "Sir, I am a residential repair guy. I do furnaces and washing machines. I don't know what kind of system you are describing, but it sounds like you need an engineering firm. Your name came up because you worked on a property in Lattimore Hills 2 years ago. The owner there said you were the only man he had ever met who could walk into a failed system and find the problem in under 30 minutes. He said, and I quote, that you have a way of listening to machines." Daniel was quiet for a second. He remembered the Lattimore job. The man had been drunk and terrible and had tried to pay him in a bottle of scotch. Daniel had taken the scotch and sold it for $90 to a guy at the hardware store. "The address?" Daniel said. Harold Kent gave him an address that was not really an address. It was a road, and then a gate, and then a second gate, and then a code. The code was 8 digits long. Daniel wrote it on the back of an electric bill with a dull pencil. "The fee for the visit alone is $3,000, Mr. Reeves. If you solve the problem, it is 50 short." Daniel set the pencil down very carefully, the way a man sets down something that might break. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, he said. He woke Sophie at 6. She was 7 years old and she had her mother's hair, thick and dark and impossible to brush. And she had his eyes, which were the color of wet slate and too serious for a child's face. She sat up in bed and looked at him without surprise because she was used to early mornings and sudden plans. "Where are we going, Dad?" "You're going to Mrs. Alvarez. I have a job." "A big one?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." "Can I have pancakes at Mrs. Alvarez?" "That depends on Mrs. Alvarez." Sophie nodded like this was a treaty being negotiated, and she climbed out of bed and went to get dressed. She put on mismatched socks on purpose because she thought it was funny. Daniel did not correct her. He had stopped correcting small things a long time ago. Small things were how a child stayed a child. He dropped her off at Mrs. Alvarez's apartment on the third floor, and Mrs. Alvarez in her housecoat took one look at Daniel and said, "You didn't sleep." "I slept." "You slept like a dog sleeps, with one eye open." "I have a job across town. I might be late picking her up." Mrs. Alvarez waved him off the way she always did, and Sophie hugged his leg for exactly 3 seconds, which was her ration, and then she disappeared into the apartment to chase the cat. Daniel went down the stairs and out into the parking lot where his truck was. The truck was a 2006 Ford F-15, with a dent in the passenger door from a shopping cart accident that was not his fault, and the passenger window did not roll down anymore, and the radio only got AM. He loved the truck the way men love things that have not betrayed them. He drove. The estate was 42 minutes from his apartment if the traffic was kind, and the traffic was kind, and he got there in 38. He had never been to this part of the county before. He had driven past the sign that said private road 3 times in his life, and each time he had wondered what kind of people lived behind a sign like that. And now he was going to find out. The first gate was wrought iron and 12 feet tall, and it opened without him pressing anything. Someone had buzzed him through from the main house. He drove up a road lined with oak trees, and the road was longer than some streets he had lived on. After about a quarter mile, the house came into view, and he did not whistle because he was not a whistler, but he did slow the truck down. The house was not a house. It was an argument. It was a long, low argument against every apartment Daniel had ever lived in, spread across the top of a hill like it had been poured there. Stone and glass and angles that did not quite make sense until you got closer. And then they made a kind of sense that made Daniel feel small in a way he had not felt since his wife's funeral. He parked the truck next to a black Bentley and did not allow himself to feel self-conscious about the dent. A man in a gray suit was waiting for him on the front steps. The man was in his 60s, thin, with the exact posture of someone who had spent 40 years trying not to inconvenience rich people. This was Harold Kent. "Mr. Reeves." "Mr. Kent." They shook hands. Harold's hand was cool and dry. Daniel's hand was warm and a little rough because he had been carrying toolboxes since he was 15. Ms. Voss is in a meeting in the East Conference Room, conducted currently by flashlight and by generator. The system failure has delayed a transaction of significant size, and she is, as you might imagine, not in a patient mood. "I am not here to be patient. I am here to fix it. Come this way." Tab. The inside of the house was dark. The kind of dark that a very expensive house becomes when its power is out, which is a different dark than a normal house. The windows let in a white morning light that fell across marble floors and across long hallways, and Daniel's boots made a sound that embarrassed him. Harold walked him down to a basement that was not a basement. It was a room the size of a small gymnasium, lined wall to wall with servers and blinking lights and climate control equipment, and in the center of the room there was a large steel panel with a door hanging open and a smell coming out of it that Daniel recognized immediately. Burnt resin. Something had cooked. "What happened before the failure?" Daniel asked, and he was already walking toward the panel with his bag. "A power surge at 3:12 this morning. The backup cut in, but the integrated system refused to reboot." "Has anyone touched anything since then?" "Our IT consultant attempted a reset 7 times. Each attempt failed." "Tell the IT consultant to stop attempting anything." Daniel knelt in front of the panel and opened his bag. He took out a flashlight and a multimeter and a screwdriver that had a blue handle that he had been using since he was 22, and he leaned into the guts of the machine the way a doctor leans into a patient. It took him 4 minutes. It was a board. A single board in a rack of 200 boards, and the surge had burned a trace on the board, and the board was refusing to hand off to its backup because the backup was plugged into the same bus. Whoever had designed the redundancy had designed it stupidly. Daniel unplugged the backup, rerouted it to an adjacent rack, pulled the fried board, bridged the connection with a piece of copper wire that he carried in a little plastic bag in his jacket pocket, and then he pushed the reset button. The room filled with light. The servers hummed. A cool breath of conditioned air sighed out of the vents above his head. Harold Kent made a small sound in his throat that was not quite a laugh. 4 minutes, Harold said. The board is done. You need a new one. I can get you one by tonight, but you are running on a wire right now, and the wire will hold, but it is a wire. I will inform Ms. Voss. No need, said a voice from the doorway. Ms. Voss informed herself. Daniel looked up. She was standing in the doorway of the server room with a cup of coffee in her hand and her hair pulled back so tight it looked almost painful. She was wearing a charcoal suit that was cut like a knife, and she was shorter than he had expected, and her eyes were the color of bourbon held up to a lamp, and she was looking at him with the kind of attention that Daniel had not felt on him in a long time. Elena Voss. You are the handyman, she said, not rudely, factually. I am a repair technician. There is a difference? To me, there is. She took one step into the room. She had taken off her shoes somewhere, and she was in black stocking feet, and the detail of her stocking feet on the concrete floor of the server room hit Daniel in a way he did not understand and did not like. 4 minutes, she said. Give or take. My consultants have been here for 6 hours. Your consultants are paid by the hour. She smiled. It was a small smile, and it was there and gone, but Daniel saw it. What is your name? She said. Daniel Reeves. Daniel Reeves, how much do I owe you? 15 for the fix, 200 for the board I am going to deliver tonight. That is a bargain. That is the price. She turned to Harold. Pay Mr. Reeves 25 and write him a check for another 25 against the board and any incidental work this house might need from him over the next 90 days. Harold did not blink. Yes, ma'am. Daniel stood up. He wiped his hands on a rag from his bag. Ma'am, I did not agree to 90 days. I'm not asking for 90 days. I'm asking for the right to call you when my house breaks. I have other clients. I will pay more than your other clients. I have a daughter. I pick her up at 3. Elena's face changed. Just a hair. Something behind her eyes loosened for half a second and then locked up again. 3, she said. I will not call you after 2. Daniel looked at her a long moment. He had walked into this room 13 minutes ago. In 13 minutes, this woman had offered him more money than he had made in the last 6 months combined, and she was looking at him like she was trying to decide if he was going to say no, and part of him wanted to say no just to see what she would do, and the other part of him, the part that had Sophie's face in it, said yes before his mouth did. Okay. Okay? Okay. 90 days, you call, I come. Within reason. Within reason, she repeated. Define reason. If my daughter has a fever, reason is that I am not coming. She nodded once, a sharp economical nod. Accepted. She turned and walked out of the server room. Her stocking feet made no sound. Harold Kent was already writing something in a leather folder, and Daniel stood there for another second, and he thought, I have just sold a piece of my life to a woman I do not know. And then he thought, no. I have just bought 90 days of groceries for my kid, and he picked up his bag and followed Harold Kent out. He delivered the board that night at 8. Harold Kent met him at the service entrance and took the board and handed him an envelope and thanked him in that same cool, dry way. And Daniel drove home with $25,000 in cash in a manila envelope on the seat next to him, and he did not turn on the radio the whole way because his hands were shaking. He did not tell Sophie. Not yet. He did not know how to tell a 7-year-old that the world had just tilted a little. He put her to bed and he read her a story about a rabbit that was afraid of the dark, and she fell asleep with her hand curled around his thumb the way she had done when she was a baby, and Daniel stayed there on the edge of her bed for a long time. He thought about his wife. He thought about the last thing Sarah had said to him, which was not profound and not a farewell, which was, there is chicken in the fridge, remember to eat. He thought about the way the oncologist had looked at him 2 years later across a desk, and the way Daniel had not cried in the office because he had known Sarah would not want him to cry in front of a stranger. He had waited until he got to the parking lot, and then he had cried sitting in the driver's seat of the truck, and a woman walking past had knocked on his window and asked him if he was okay, and he had said yes, and she had walked on. That was the kind of world he lived in, a world where people knocked on your window to ask if you were okay, a world where a stranger mattered. He did not know if Elena Voss lived in that world. He suspected she did not. He put the envelope of cash in the freezer behind a bag of peas. He did not know why. It felt safer there. 2 days later, Harold Kent called him again. Ms. Voss would like to discuss a more permanent arrangement. Define permanent. She would like to offer you a position. Full-time. Residence on the estate if you prefer, or a housing allowance if you do not. Benefits for yourself and any dependent. Salary to be determined by negotiation, but not less than $240,000 per year. Daniel was sitting at his kitchen table when Harold said this. He was eating a grilled cheese sandwich that he had just made for Sophie, and he had eaten half of it before he realized he had eaten it. And when Harold said $240,000, Daniel set the sandwich down very slowly on a paper towel. Why? He said. I beg your pardon. Why is she offering me this? She has 100 men who can do what I did. Apparently she does not, Mr. Reeves. She has been looking for some time. She would like you to come to the estate tomorrow morning to discuss it. Daniel looked across the small kitchen at Sophie, who was drawing a picture of a horse with 4 legs on one side and no legs on the other, and who was humming to herself, and who did not own a single pair of shoes without a hole in them. I'll be there at 9, Daniel said. Fine. He did not sleep that night. He lay on the pull-out couch and looked at the ceiling, and he ran the math in his head the way other men ran scripture. 240,000. He had never in his life held a number like that in his hands. 240,000 was a house, a real house with a yard where Sophie could have a dog. 240,000 was a college fund that was not a joke. 240,000 was dental work for his mother, who had been wearing a bridge that did not fit for 6 years, and who refused to tell him because she did not want him to worry. But 240,000 was also a leash. He knew that. He was not stupid. Women like Elena Voss did not pay that kind of money for a handyman. They paid that kind of money for a man they owned. And Daniel Reeves had not been owned by anyone since he was 19 years old and had quit the Marines because he had realized he was better alone. He got up at 3 a.m. and made coffee and sat on the floor in Sophie's doorway and watched her sleep. What would your mother say? He whispered. Sarah did not answer. Sarah had been dead for 2 years and 4 months, but he could hear her voice anyway, the way he always could when he needed it. Sarah would have said, "Take the money, stupid. Take it and don't ask questions and don't fall in love with her and don't let her treat you like a dog. Take it for the kid." Daniel nodded at the dark. "Okay," he said. Mas. At 9 the next morning he was back at the estate, and this time Harold Kent was not the one who met him. Elena Voss met him herself, in a sunroom at the back of the house that faced a garden that was bigger than the public park he had taken Sophie to on her last birthday. She was sitting at a small iron table with 2 cups of coffee already poured, and she was wearing jeans which shocked him more than the house had, and a white shirt that was untucked and her hair was down, and she looked like a different person than the woman in the server room. She looked 27 instead of 31. "Sit," she said. He sat. "Black?" she said, and she meant the coffee. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. I am not a ma'am." "What do I call you?" "Elena. In this house, Elena. In this house." "Outside this house, Ms. Voss. Most people never see inside this house, so most people will only ever know you said Ms. Voss. You and I will know you said Elena." He studied her. She was not flirting. He did not think she was flirting. He had been married for 9 years and he knew what flirting looked like. And this was not that. This was something else. This was a woman who had decided something in private and was informing him of the decision in public. "Elena," he said, testing it. "Good." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract, 15 pages. He did not pretend to understand all of it, but he read every page because his father had taught him that you never sign anything you have not read. And he had never broken that rule, and he was not going to break it now in front of a billionaire. It took him 31 minutes. She sat across from him the whole time without saying a word, and without looking at her phone, which, he thought later, was the most striking thing about her, because he had watched her phone light up 23 times while he was reading, and she had not glanced at it once. When he was done, he looked up. "2 things," he said. "Go." Page 4. It says I cannot discuss any aspect of my employment with anyone outside the estate. That includes my daughter. I am not agreeing to that. My daughter is 7. She is going to ask me where I work, and I am going to tell her. Strike it. What else? Page 11. It says I can be terminated at will with no cause and no severance. I want 30 days notice or 30 days pay, whichever you prefer, in any case other than me committing a crime. 30 days. 30. She picked up a pen. She struck out the two clauses he had named. She initialed both strikes. She slid the folder back. Anything else, Daniel? He thought about it. Yeah, he said. Why me? She leaned back in her chair. She looked at him for a long time. The garden outside was doing something with the light, something gold, and the light was on her face, and he saw for the first time that she was tired. Not sleepy tired, tired the way a roof is tired after 50 years of rain. Because you fixed it in 4 minutes, she said. That is not an answer. Because you fixed it in 4 minutes, and when I walked into the room, you did not stand up. You did not apologize for your clothes. You did not call me ma'am in the way other people call me ma'am, which is the way they say the word of God. You told me your daughter had a 3 o'clock pickup. Do you know how many men in my life have told me they have a 3 o'clock pickup, Daniel? No. 1. Now. He did not know what to say to that, so he did not say anything. He picked up the pen. He signed the last page of the contract. He slid it back across the table. She did not smile, but something in her shoulders came down half an inch, and he noticed it. Welcome to the house, she said. Thank you, Elena. You start Monday. Monday. One more thing, Daniel. Yeah? Bring your daughter. I would like to meet her. He paused with his hand on the arm of the chair. Why? Because she is going to be part of your life while you are part of this house, and I do not like surprises. I like to know what I am dealing with. And because a 7-year-old is a very honest judge of character, and I want to know what she thinks of me. She will tell you the truth? I am counting on it. He stood up. He shook her hand. Her hand was small and cool, and she did not shake like a woman who had been taught to shake soft. She shook like she meant it. He walked out to the truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a minute before he turned the key. He looked at the house in the rearview mirror. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Alvarez. Sophie threw up at school. Nothing bad. Coming home now, not a fever, just nerves. She has a math test. Daniel exhaled. He put his hand on the steering wheel. Okay, he said to no one. Okay. He drove home to his daughter. The following Monday, at 8 in the morning, Daniel Reeves pulled his truck through the wrought iron gate of the Voss estate with Sophie in the passenger seat, a brown paper lunch bag on her lap, and a loose tooth she had been worrying with her tongue for 3 days. She had put on her best dress, which was not very best, and she had combed her hair herself, which was to say she had put a barrette in it sideways, and she was looking at the house through the windshield with her mouth slightly open. Dad? Yeah? Is this a castle? No, honey, it is a house. It looks like a castle. It is a house that thinks it is a castle. Sophie considered that. Then she said, I don't trust it. Daniel laughed. It was the first laugh he had laughed out loud in a long time, a real one, from the stomach. Good, he said. Don't trust it yet. Let's see what it does. He parked the truck. He walked around and opened her door. She put her small hand in his large hand, and they walked up the stone steps together, and Elena Voss was waiting at the top of the stairs in jeans and a sweater, with no shoes on, and she knelt down so she was the same height as Sophie, and she held out her hand, and she said, very seriously, I am Elena. Thank you for coming to my house. Sophie looked at her for a long moment. Then Sophie said, Your house is too big. Elena did not laugh. She nodded, like a judge accepting testimony. You're right, Elena said. It is too big. I did not build it. I inherited it. I do not know what to do with most of it. You could turn some of it into a library. That is a very good idea. With a ladder on wheels. Absolutely with a ladder on wheels. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Then she let go of her father's hand and walked past Elena into the house without asking permission, the way 7-year-olds do when they have decided a person is acceptable. Daniel stayed where he was. Elena stood up slowly. She watched Sophie disappear around a corner into the foyer. Then she looked at Daniel. She is you, Elena said, quietly. She's her mother, Daniel said. Mostly. Elena did not ask about her mother. He was grateful. He had been braced for the question, and she did not ask it. And that one small mercy, a woman who did not need to fill a silence, was the first thing about Elena Voss that hit him somewhere he had not been hit in a long time. He followed his daughter into the house. And behind him, Elena Voss stood on the steps of her father's mansion in her bare feet and watched the two of them go. And for the first time in 7 years, she did not reach for her phone. The house swallowed Sophie the way big rooms swallow small children, and by the time Daniel caught up to her, she was standing in the middle of the foyer with her head tilted all the way back, looking up at a chandelier that was bigger than the car he had first learned to drive in. She was counting. He could tell because her lips were moving. 64, she announced when he reached her. 64 what? Lights. On the thing. There are 64 lights on the thing. Elena came in behind them, still barefoot, her sweater sleeves pulled down over her hands, and she stopped next to Sophie and looked up at the chandelier too, and she said, I have never counted them. You have lived here and you have never counted them. I have lived here on and off for 4 years, Sophie. I have never counted them. That is very sad. Elena made a small sound that might have been the start of a laugh, and Daniel watched her face do something he had not seen it do before. Something unguarded. It was there for 2 seconds, and then it was gone. And she was Elena Voss again. Billionaire, polished, controlled, but Daniel had seen the 2 seconds, and he was going to remember them. Sophie, he said, we talked about manners. I am being mannered. I said it was sad, not stupid. Okay, sad is allowed. Miss Campbell at school said sad is a respectful word. Elena turned to him with one eyebrow raised half an inch, and Daniel said, Miss Campbell is the school counselor. She visits Sophie's class once a week. I see. Sophie has a lot of opinions about Miss Campbell. I can tell. Sophie was already wandering. She had spotted a hallway that went off to the east, and she was drifting toward it the way a cat drifts toward a warm patch on a floor, and Daniel took 2 long strides and caught her by the shoulder. You stay with me. This is not your house. Okay. You do not touch anything. Okay. You do not open any doors. Dad? Sophie. She sighed the sigh of a 7-year-old who has been saddled with an unreasonable father, and she fell into line behind his leg, and Elena watched this whole negotiation with a small, quiet smile at the corner of her mouth. You can let her touch things, Elena said. She breaks things. Everything in this house is insured for more than it is worth. She still breaks things. Daniel, Elena. I'm not being polite. I'm telling you, she can touch things. He looked at her. He looked at Sophie, who was now openly lobbying with her eyes. He looked back at Elena. One thing, he said. She can touch one thing. Her choice. Sophie's eyes went wide. She turned in a slow circle in the foyer, scanning, calculating, and then she pointed at a brass bowl on a side table that was probably 300 years old and said, That. Why that? It is shiny, and it looks like it would be cold. Elena walked over, picked up the bowl, and handed it to her. Sophie took it in both hands, and her whole face became a question. And then she said, It is cold. I was right. You were right, Elena said. Sophie set it back down very carefully, two-handed, the way she handled things she knew she was being trusted with. And Daniel watched his daughter, and he watched Elena watch his daughter, and something in his chest shifted half an inch. He did not like it. He pushed it back down. Harold is going to show you around, Elena said to him. I have a call at 10. I will find you after. Okay? Sophie, there's a woman named Ms. Bellamy who runs the kitchen. She is making cinnamon rolls for some reason that I do not understand. Would you like one? Yes, please. Follow Harold. Harold appeared from nowhere, the way he seemed to, and Sophie went off behind him without a backward glance, chattering already about the chandelier and the bowl and Miss Campbell, and Elena stood in the foyer with Daniel, and they were alone for the first time since he had signed the contract. She is very unafraid, Elena said. She is 7. At 7, fear has not finished moving in yet. Is that a line you wrote or a line you read? I wrote it, on a bad night. Elena looked at him for a second longer than was comfortable, and then she said, I have to take this call. Harold will set you up. Your office is down the east corridor, 3rd door on the right. It is not really an office, it is a room I cleared out for you.
There's a desk and a lamp and a chair. If you need anything else, ask. I do not need anything else. I suspect you will.
She turned and walked away, and Daniel stood in the foyer alone for 30 seconds, and then he went to find his daughter. He found her in the kitchen, sitting on a high stool with flour on her nose and half a cinnamon roll in one fist, deep in conversation with an older black woman in an apron who had the kind of face that had fed a lot of children over a lot of years. Miss Bellamy, he assumed. The kitchen smelled like butter and cinnamon and yeast, and it was bigger than Daniel's entire apartment, and there was a copper pot hanging on a hook that was bigger than Sophie's head. Dad. Yeah, Miss Bellamy says you can have one. Can I? She says you look like you need one. Miss Bellamy turned around and looked Daniel up and down with the expertise of a woman who had been reading men for 40 years, and she said, Honey, you eat. Yes, ma'am. And don't call me ma'am. I am Geraldine, or Bellamy, or Ms. B. I answer to all three. I do not answer to ma'am. Yes, Ms. B. Better. She slid a cinnamon roll onto a plate the size of a hubcap and pushed it across the butcher block toward him. He took it. He ate it. He had not eaten anything warm and sweet that someone else had made for him since Sarah had died, and he was not prepared for what it did to him, which was make his throat close up for just a second, and he coughed once and covered it with a cough into his fist, and Ms. Bellamy saw it and did not say anything. Your girl is a talker, Ms. Bellamy said. She comes by it honest. You are not a talker. No, ma'am. Ms. B, no. Your girl is going to make friends in this house. That is good. That is good, and that is a problem. Daniel looked up from his plate. Ms. Bellamy was wiping her hands on her apron and looking at him with her head tilted. A problem how? This is not a house where people stay long, Mr. Reeves. The staff turns over. Miss Voss fires fast and hires faster. Your girl is going to love people here, and then they will be gone and she will cry about it, and you will have to explain it to her, and that is going to be a hard conversation. I will have it. I know you will. I am just saying, be ready for it. Sophie was not listening. She was building a small mountain out of flour on the counter and telling it a story about a horse. Daniel watched her for a second. Thank you, Ms. B, he said. He found his office 40 minutes later. It was not really an office. Elena had been right about that. It was a small room off the east corridor with a desk and a lamp and a chair and a window that looked out on the garden, and there was a phone on the desk that had more buttons than any phone Daniel had ever seen, and there was a laptop next to the phone that was still in its plastic wrap. Harold was waiting for him. The phone has an internal line, an external line, and a direct line to Ms. Voss. The direct line rings twice and then goes to her assistant. Ms. Voss picks it up herself only when she is in this house and only on the second ring, never on the first. Do not call on the first ring. She considers the first ring presumptuous. Okay, the laptop has been configured for you. Your email is daniel.reeves@voss.house. No capital letters, no numbers. Your password is on this index card. Memorize it and destroy the card. Seriously. Seriously. Daniel looked at the index card. The password was 17 characters long and contained 2 symbols and a German noun. Memorize it. I am working on it. I will leave you to your first day. If you need anything, dial 0. Harold? Yes. What exactly am I doing here? Harold paused in the doorway. He turned back. That is a very good question, Mr. Reeves. I do not have a full answer. Your contract says you are the Director of Residential Systems and Operations. That is a made-up title. Before this week, no such position existed in this house. I believe Miss Voss invented it for you because she did not have a title that fit what she wanted from you. Which is what? Which is someone who will tell her when something is broken and fix it, and not lie to her about either. That is a low bar. You would be surprised, Mr. Reeves, how few men in this house have cleared it. Harold closed the door softly behind him, and Daniel sat down in the chair. And the chair was the most comfortable chair he had ever sat in his life. And he felt for a moment like he might cry, and he did not know why, and he put his hands flat on the desk, and he breathed in and out slowly 3 times until the feeling passed. The first 2 weeks at the estate went the way a new pair of boots goes. Stiff, awkward, a little blister on one heel by day 3. Daniel learned the house the way he had once learned a neighborhood, by walking it. He walked every corridor. He opened every utility closet. He read every manual of every piece of equipment in the server room, in the pool room, in the kitchen, in the two separate climate systems that fed the east and west wings. He took notes in a black composition book that he had bought at a drugstore for $2. On day 5, he replaced the bridge wire in the server room with a proper board, and he did the work at 2 in the morning so he would not interrupt anything. And when he came up from the basement at 3, Elena was sitting at the long kitchen island in a gray bathrobe, drinking water. And she looked at him and she said, "You work at strange hours." I did not want to interrupt the house. The house would not have noticed. I would have noticed. She took a sip of her water. Her hair was wet. She had just come from somewhere. A shower, maybe? Or the pool? He did not ask. "Sit," she said. He sat on the stool opposite hers. The kitchen was dark except for one small light under the cabinets. "Do you sleep?" she said. "When I can." That is not an answer. 4 hours, 5 on a good night. Why? Since my wife died, I have not slept right. It is not a story. It is just a fact. Elena nodded. She did not say she was sorry. She did not ask how Sarah had died. He realized later that this was her second mercy to him, the absence of the performed sympathy that every other person he had ever met had offered him. And he realized it had been a deliberate choice on her part, and he began against his will to respect her for it. "I do not sleep either," she said. "Why?" "Because my brain does not turn off. Because the company has 17,000 employees, and every one of them is a decision I did not get to make. Because I am 31 years old, and my father died and left me something I do not entirely want, and I am not allowed to say that out loud to anyone. Because anyone I say it to either wants to take it from me or will put it in the newspaper." Daniel did not answer for a minute. He was thinking. "You are saying it to me." "I am." "Why?" "Because you cannot take it from me and you will not put it in the newspaper." "How do you know I will not put it in the newspaper?" "Because you signed a contract that would destroy you if you did. I would not do it anyway." "I know." "How do you know?" "I know." She did not explain. She drank the rest of her water. She stood up. She went to the sink and rinsed the glass and set it in the drying rack herself, which was the first thing she had done since he had met her that was not imperial, and then she turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at him. "Daniel?" "Yeah." "Go home. Sleep. If you can. Okay? Tomorrow I have something I want to show you." "Okay." He went home. He did not sleep. The something she wanted to show him turned out to be a room in the West Wing that he had not been given access to. It was a long rectangular room, empty except for 2 chairs, and it had a wall of windows that looked out on a meadow that Daniel had not even known was part of the property. She met him at the door at 11 the next morning, and she opened it with a key, and she walked in ahead of him and stood in the middle of the room with her arms crossed. "What is this?" he said. "This is the room I never come into." "Why?" "Because my father died in it." Daniel stopped walking. He stood very still. "He had a heart attack at that window. I was in Tokyo. By the time I got home, he had been dead for 16 hours. The housekeeper found him. His body was cremated before I landed. I never saw him. I never said anything to him. This is the room I never come into." "Elena, I want to turn it into something. A library, maybe." Sophie said the house needed a library. "I have been thinking about what she said. I have been thinking about it for 2 weeks." "You have been thinking about a 7-year-old's opinion for 2 weeks?" "Yes." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I do not know who else to tell it to, and because I want you to design the library." "I am not an architect. I have architects. Architects will build what I tell them to build. I want you to tell me what to build. I want it to be a room that a person would want to sit in. I do not know what a room like that looks like. I have never lived in one." He turned in a slow circle. He looked at the light coming through the windows. He looked at the floor, the ceiling, the proportions. He thought about what Sarah would have done with a room like this. Sarah had loved books. Sarah had read at the kitchen table while he cooked, and she had read on the couch while he watched television with the sound off, and she had read in the hospital bed at the end when she could still hold a book, and then she had listened to audiobooks when she could not. "A wood floor," he said, "not marble. Wood is forgiving. Wood lets you sit on it." "Okay." 2 chairs, not 4. A library with 4 chairs is a waiting room. A library with 2 chairs is a conversation. "Okay." A fireplace, not gas, real, a wood-burning fireplace. You never use it, that is fine, but you have to know you could. Okay. One of those ladders your Sophie talked about. She is not my Sophie. For right now, in this room, she is. That is her ladder. Daniel paused. He looked at Elena. She was looking at the floor. Okay, he said, quieter. Sophie's ladder. What else? A window seat, if the wall can take it. A seat where a person can pull their feet up. People read with their feet up. Your father did not design this house for people to put their feet up. No, he did not. That is why you do not come in here. Elena looked up at him then, and her eyes were bright in a way he had not seen, and she did not cry. She was not the kind of woman who cried in front of someone the second time she had ever been alone with them, but she was close to something, and then she swallowed once, and she stepped back, and she said, "Draw it." I cannot draw. Describe it. I will have someone draw it. Okay. He described it. He talked for an hour. He talked about the fireplace and the wood and the window seat and the lamp that should go by the window seat and the kind of rug that should go under the two chairs, a flat weave, nothing fancy, something a child could spill juice on. Elena wrote nothing down. She just listened. When he was finished, she nodded once, sharply, and she said, "Thank you, Daniel. You're welcome. I would like you to bring Sophie here next week. When the floor is in, she will want to run on it. I am counting on it." He did not say anything else. They walked out. She locked the door behind them. He went back to his office. He sat down in the chair. He looked at his hands for a long time. They were shaking a little. The rumors started in week 3. It was Harold who told him, not because Harold was a gossip, but because Harold was a man who understood that information was a form of loyalty. He stopped by Daniel's office on a Thursday afternoon, and he closed the door behind him, and he sat down across the desk, and he said, "Mr. Reeves, I would like to speak with you off the record." "Okay?" "There is talk in the house." "What kind of talk?" "The usual kind. The kind that happens in any house where a man and a woman are seen speaking for more than 3 minutes at a time." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes for a second. He opened them. Who is talking? The junior groundskeeper, 2 of the kitchen staff, a girl who does the linens. I have addressed it with each of them. I am not telling you this to cause you concern. I am telling you because if it reaches Miss Voss, I want you to have heard it from me first, not from her. Is there anything to tell? I am not asking that question, Mr. Reeves. Harold. Yes. There is nothing to tell. I did not ask, Mr. Reeves. I'm telling you anyway. Harold looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then he nodded. I believe you, Mr. Reeves, for what it is worth. I have been in this house for 19 years. I have seen a great many things. I have seen Ms. Voss meet a great many men. I have not seen her ask any of them to redesign a room. He stood up. He opened the door. Harold? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Reeves, you might want to be seen less with Miss Voss in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. The kitchen staff arrives at 4. They see the 2 water glasses. He closed the door behind him. Daniel sat at his desk for a long time. He thought about the 2 glasses. He had not been counting them. Elena had been counting them. Elena had left the 1 glass in the drying rack. He had set his down next to it, and someone had come in at 4 and seen them. He picked up the phone. He dialed 0. He said, "Please tell Ms. Voss I need 5 minutes at her convenience." He expected to wait an hour. He was called back in 8 minutes. Elena was in her office on the 2nd floor, a room he had only been in twice, both times briefly. She was behind her desk when he walked in, and she looked up from her laptop and she said, "Close the door." He closed the door. He sat down. He did not wait for her to invite him. "There is talk in the house," he said, "about you and me. Harold told me this morning. I am not bringing it to you because I am worried about myself. I am bringing it to you because my daughter is in this house 3 days a week, and if it becomes a problem, I need to know now so I can protect her from it." Elena closed the laptop. She did not look surprised. She looked tired, and she looked for a second much older than 31. "I know." "You knew." "I have known for 4 days. Harold does not tell me about staff gossip. I have other people for that. I knew there was talk on Monday. I have been waiting for you to come to me." "Waiting?" "Yes." "Why?" Because I wanted to see if you would come to me or if you would let it sit. Most men let it sit. They assume a woman will handle it. I was curious what you would do. This is a test. Not a test. A data point. I do not like being a data point, Elena. I know. He stood up. He walked to the window. He put his hands in his back pockets. He looked out at the driveway where his truck was parked next to two sedans that were each worth more than the building he lived in. I'm going to say something, he said, and then I am going to leave, and you are going to think about it for as long as you need to think about it. And you are going to tell me what you want to do. Okay? Okay. I like my job. I like my office. I like that room you're going to turn into a library. I like the woman who runs the kitchen. I like the fact that my daughter has gained 4 pounds in 3 weeks, and she sleeps through the night now because she is not hungry when she goes to bed. I do not want to lose any of this. I know. But I'm not sleeping with you, Elena. I know. And I'm not going to start, because if I start, this ends. Because the second I start, I am not a man in your house. I am a problem in your house. And I watched Harold try to warn me today with more tact than any man has ever used on me. And I understood what he was saying, and I want you to understand what I'm saying back. I understand. Say it back to me. Daniel. Say it back, Elena, so I know we are clear. She stood up. She walked around the desk. She did not come close to him. She stopped about 6 feet away, and she put her hands in the pockets of her slacks, and she looked him in the eyes, and she said, "You are not sleeping with me. You are not going to. If that were what I wanted, I would not have hired you." He looked at her. He nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Thank you." Daniel. Yeah, I have not had a conversation like this with another person in this house in 9 years. Like what? Honest. He did not know what to say to that, so he did not say anything. He opened the door and he walked out, and he went back to his office, and he sat at his desk, and he put his head in his hands for about 30 seconds, and then he took his hands away from his face, and he picked up his phone, and he called Mrs. Alvarez, and he asked her how Sophie's day was going. "She's fine. She is coloring." "Good. Tell her I love her." "She knows you love her, Daniel. She will want to know why you called." "Tell her I just wanted to hear that she was coloring." "I will tell her." He hung up. That night, the rumor grew teeth. It happened because of a photograph taken by a groundskeeper's nephew who was visiting the property on a day he should not have been on the property, a kid of 19 with a phone and no sense, and he took a picture through a hedge of Elena and Daniel standing on the back terrace at dusk. Standing, not touching. Elena had her arms crossed. Daniel had his hands in his pockets. They were 2 feet apart. In the picture, because of the angle of the light, and because Elena's head was tilted up toward him, and because Daniel was looking down at her with the expression of a man who was listening hard, it looked like something. It looked like something it was not. The kid sold the photo to a tabloid for $800. The tabloid ran it on a Friday morning. The headline said, "Voss heiress in secret romance with mystery man. His identity may shock you." Daniel learned about it the way he learned about everything else lately, which was from Harold, who came into his office at 7:15 in the morning holding a phone in one hand and a cup of coffee for Daniel in the other, and who said without sitting down, "Mr. Reeves, we have a situation." Daniel looked at the phone. Harold handed it over. Daniel looked at the photo. He looked at the headline. He set the phone down on his desk very carefully, the way he set down things that might break, and he said, "Where is Sophie?" "Sophie is at Mrs. Alvarez's apartment. She is safe. The tabloid does not have her name. They do not have your name yet either. They have called you, and I quote, a rugged, unidentified man of uncertain background." Uncertain background? It is not a complimentary phrase, Mr. Reeves. It is how tabloids describe anyone they have not been able to look up in a Yale directory. How long until they know? 6 hours? Possibly less. Does Elena know? Ms. Voss was informed at 5:42 this morning. She is in a meeting with her head of communications right now. She has asked that you remain in the house until she can speak with you. She has also asked that Sophie be brought here this afternoon for her safety. My safety. Her safety, Mr. Reeves. Your daughter's. The estate is the most secure location in the county. Your apartment building is not. This tabloid has a long history of sending photographers to the homes of the, quote, unidentified men of uncertain background it features in its headlines. Ms. Voss does not want your daughter photographed. Daniel sat very still for about 5 seconds. Then he stood up. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair. He grabbed his keys. I'm going to get her myself, right now. Mr. Reeves, do not argue with me, Harold. I was not going to argue with you. I was going to tell you that a car and a driver are already waiting in the South Drive, and that Ms. Voss has instructed that you be taken wherever you need to go and that you not drive yourself, because your truck has already been photographed in the driveway of this house, and they will be looking for it. Daniel stopped with his hand on the doorknob. She thought of that. She thought of that 40 minutes ago, Mr. Reeves. She is very good at this. Harold. Yes. Thank you. Go get your daughter, Mr. Reeves. I will handle the house. He went. The car was a black sedan with tinted windows, and the driver was a man in his 50s who did not introduce himself and did not need to. And Daniel sat in the back seat and he watched the estate disappear behind them, and he thought about what he was going to say to Sophie, and he thought about what he was going to say to Elena, and he thought about the fact that 48 hours ago he had told Elena Voss to her face that he was not going to sleep with her, and now her face and his face were on the internet together, and the whole world had already decided what was true. His phone buzzed in his lap. A text. Unknown number. This is Elena. Use this number. I will explain when I see you. He read the text twice. He typed back. Picking up Sophie. Home in an hour. The reply was immediate. Home. One word. He did not know what she meant by it at first. Then he thought about it. She meant the estate. She had heard him say home and meant it about the estate, not about his apartment. He had meant it about his apartment. He did not correct her. He did not know what to correct her to. The sedan pulled up in front of Mrs. Alvarez's building, and Daniel got out, and he went up to the 3rd floor, and he knocked, and Mrs. Alvarez opened the door, and she took one look at his face, and she said, Is someone dead? No, no one is dead. I just need Sophie, right now. She is going to stay at the estate for a few days. It is going to be all right. But I need her now. Mrs. Alvarez looked at him. She did not ask questions. She was a woman who had raised 4 children and had buried a husband and who did not ask questions when she did not need to. She turned around and she called Sophie's name, and Sophie came running with a marker in her hand and a green stripe on her cheek, and she said, Dad? Kid, we are going to the big house for a little while. Go get your bag. Am I in trouble? No. You are not in trouble. I am not in trouble. No one is in trouble. We are just going to stay at the big house for a few nights. Bring your pajamas and bring the bear. Sophie looked at him for 2 seconds with the seriousness that only a 7-year-old can muster, and then she turned around and went to get her bag, and Mrs. Alvarez stepped out into the hall and closed the door behind her so Sophie could not hear. Daniel? Yes? You are in trouble. Yes. Is it the kind of trouble that ends with you okay? I don't know yet. If it is not, you come here. You bring her here. You do not take her anywhere strange. You understand me. I understand you. My door is open to that child at any hour. I know. Go. He went. In the car, Sophie sat next to him with the bear in her lap and her bag at her feet, and she looked out the window for a while without saying anything, and then she said, Dad. Yeah. Why is there a driver? Because Elena asked for one today. Did something happen? He looked at her. He thought about lying. He did not lie to her. He had made a rule when Sarah had died, and the rule was that he would never lie to Sophie about anything that mattered, because he had watched other people lie to her about Sarah, and he had watched it hurt her worse than the truth would have. And he had sworn on Sarah's kitchen counter on the day of the funeral that he would never do that to his daughter. Yes, he said. Something happened. Somebody took a picture of me and Elena at the house last night, and they put it in a magazine today, and they said something about us that is not true. Elena is working on it. We are going to stay at the big house for a little while because Elena's house is safer than ours for a few days. That is the whole story. Sophie chewed on this for a minute. She looked at the bear. What did they say that wasn't true? They said Elena and I were kissing. We were not kissing. We were talking. Oh. Do you understand? Yeah. Any questions? Was it a good picture? Daniel laughed. It surprised him. It surprised Sophie more. because she had not heard her father laugh twice in 1 month in a long time. And she looked at him, and she laughed too, without knowing what she was laughing at, just because he had. "It was a very good picture," he said. "It made us look very dramatic." "Was your hair good?" "My hair was fine." "Was her hair good?" "Her hair is always good." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and she went back to looking out the window. And she did not ask anything else. And Daniel watched the side of her face for a long time, and he thought about the fact that he had told her the truth, and she had accepted it. And he thought about the fact that he had no idea what Elena was going to say when he walked through the door of the estate. And he thought about the fact that whatever Elena was going to say, he was going to have to decide in the next hour whether the thing he had told her 2 days ago in her office was still true. He was not going to sleep with her. That part was still true. But something else had changed. Something he did not have a name for yet. Something that had changed the first time she handed his daughter a 300-year-old bowl and said it was cold, and had changed again the first time she had told him about the room where her father died, and had changed a third time this morning when she had sent a car for him without being asked because she had already thought of his daughter before he had. The sedan turned onto the private road. The gate opened in front of them. Daniel put his hand on top of his daughter's small hand on the seat between them, and she squeezed his fingers, and the car went up the long driveway lined with oaks. And Elena Voss was standing at the top of the stone steps in jeans and bare feet, with her arms crossed over her chest, and she was waiting. Elena did not come down the steps. She waited where she was, and Daniel got the door for Sophie, and Sophie climbed out with the bear tucked under her arm and her bag slung diagonally across her chest the way a tiny soldier carries a pack. And she looked up at Elena at the top of the stairs, and Elena looked down at her, and for a second neither one of them said anything. Then Sophie said, "Dad told me about the picture." Elena absorbed that. She came down the steps then, one at a time, unhurried, and she stopped on the third step from the bottom, so she was still a little taller than the child, but not by much. "What did your dad tell you, Sophie?" "He said somebody took a picture of you and him talking and said you were kissing." "That is accurate." "Were you kissing?" "No." "Okay." Sophie started up the stairs past her. Elena put a hand on her shoulder, very lightly, so lightly that Sophie could have walked through it, and Sophie stopped. "Sophie, I want to say one thing." "Okay. I'm sorry your dad had to tell you about the picture. That was a thing a 7-year-old should not have to know about. I am going to do what I can so that you do not have to know about any more pictures. I want you to tell me if anyone at your school says anything to you." "Okay. Your dad, too. Anything. Any kid. Any grown-up. You tell me. I can fix it." "Can you fix everything?" "No." "Okay. But I can fix school." "Okay." Sophie looked at her a moment longer, and then she said, "Thank you," very solemnly, and she went into the house. Elena came down the last 2 steps. She stopped in front of Daniel. She looked at him, and her eyes had a tightness in them that he had not seen before, and she said, "They have your name." "Already?" 40 minutes ago. It will be online in an hour. Full name. Last 3 addresses. Your Marine Corps discharge. Your wife's obituary. Your daughter's school." He did not answer. He could not for a second. "Daniel." "Yeah. I'm sorry." "Elena." "I did not do this, but I am sorry. This is what happens when someone stands next to me. I did not think about it when I was standing next to you. That was my mistake. I am sorry." "Stop apologizing." "I am not going to stop apologizing. I was careless. I should have noticed the hedge. I should have kept the lights lower. I have cameras on every inch of this property, and I missed a 19-year-old with a phone, and now your daughter is on the internet. I will apologize for as long as I need to apologize, and then I will do something about it." He looked at her. Her jaw was set. Her hands were in the pockets of her jeans, and they were fists inside the pockets. He could see the outline of the knuckles through the denim. "Okay," he said. "Come inside." "Okay." They went inside. Sophie had already found the kitchen. They could hear her voice from down the corridor, and they could hear Miss Bellamy's voice answering, and Daniel exhaled half a breath he did not know he had been holding. Elena took him to a room he had not been in. It was a small sitting room on the first floor with a fireplace that was not lit, and 2 leather chairs that looked 100 years old, and a low table between them with a decanter on it. And she closed the door behind them, and she did not offer him anything from the decanter, and he did not ask. She sat. He sat. I have 3 problems, she said. I'm going to tell you all 3, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about them, and then I am going to ask you what you think. Okay. Okay? Problem 1. The tabloid story is going to be followed by a real story in a real paper by tonight. My head of communications has confirmed that. I cannot stop it. I can only shape it. Okay? Problem 2. My board has an emergency call tomorrow at 8 a.m. They're going to ask me to make a statement. The statement they want me to make is that you are a former employee who was let go last week, and that any appearance of intimacy in the photograph is an illusion of the angle. They will suggest I pay you a severance in the low 6 figures, conditional on you signing a non-disparagement, and they will suggest you and your daughter leave the state. Daniel had been breathing steady. When she said leave the state, the breath stopped. Keep going. Problem 3. There is an opportunity in Colorado, a senior operations position at a large ranch owned by a friend of mine. Legitimate, quiet, housing included. Very good school for Sophie. $180,000 a year. My friend has an opening. He has not filled it. He has been waiting for the right person. I mentioned you to him this morning. He is interested. Daniel stood up. He could not help it. He walked to the window and looked out without seeing anything. He put his hand flat against the glass. You already set up an escape hatch. I set up an option, Daniel. You did it this morning. I did it at 6:45 this morning while my head of communications was on hold. Before you talked to me. Yes. He did not answer. He kept his hand on the glass. The glass was cold. You want me to say thank you? No. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me what you think. What I think is that you have been a billionaire for 4 years, and you solve every problem the same way, which is that you buy the problem a ticket somewhere else. He said it quieter than he meant to, not because he was trying to be kind, because he was tired. His shoulder hurt where he had been gripping the sedan door handle for half an hour. He took his hand off the glass and turned around. Elena had not moved. She was still sitting in the chair. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face did not change when he said what he said, but something in her eyes did. That is fair, she said. It is not entirely fair, but it is partly fair. You know it is partly fair. I know. I'm going to sit back down now. Please. He sat back down. He rubbed his face with both hands. He looked at her over the top of his fingers. Tell me about Colorado, he said. It is real, Daniel. I am not inventing it. My friend's name is Jim Hollister. He runs 12,000 acres and a lodge operation and 3 small businesses out of a town called Evans Creek, population 400. The school district is the best in a 100-mile radius. The house on the property is a 3-bedroom on a hill with a wood stove. He needs somebody who can keep everything running, who will not steal, and who does not care about being in charge. He pays well because he keeps his people. The last man in the job was with him 22 years. He retired in June. Jim has been looking since. Why me? Because I told him about you. What did you tell him? I told him you fixed a $300,000 system failure in 4 minutes with a piece of copper wire. I told him you told me to my face you would not sleep with me. I told him your daughter is 7 and she thinks my house is too big. He laughed at the last one. He said the first 2 were why he wanted to meet you. When does he want to meet me? He will fly out tomorrow if you want to meet him tomorrow. He will meet you in any state at any airport. He said, quote, just tell him I will come to him. Daniel shook his head slowly, not in refusal, in something else. Elena. Yeah. If I take this, Sophie and I are in Colorado in 4 weeks. Yes. And you are in Manhattan or Tokyo or wherever alone. I am always alone. That is a constant. Do not factor me into this. I am factoring you into this. Do not. I am. She looked at the floor. She did not say anything for a long minute. Then she said, very quietly, please do not make me part of this decision. I am the worst reason to make this decision. I am the reason there is a decision at all. Make it about Sophie. If you make it about me, one of us is going to be wrong about something. He sat with that. Okay, he said. Okay. I want to meet Jim. I will call him. Not tomorrow, today. Right now. I want him on a plane today. I want to see him tomorrow morning. Okay? And I want to be alone with Sophie for the rest of this afternoon. I am not going to talk to her about Colorado. I'm going to watch her. I'm going to see what she does in this house when no one is looking. I'm going to decide based on that. Okay? Elena. Yeah. Your board call tomorrow. Yes. Do not make the statement they want. Not yet. Not until I have talked to Jim. Give me until tomorrow night. She looked at him. Her mouth did something complicated. They are going to be very unhappy. I know. They are going to threaten me. They are already threatening you, Elena. You just have not told me that part yet. She did not answer. I am right. Yes. What have they threatened? My chair is a man named Victor Lane. He has been on the board since before I was born. He was my father's friend. He does not like me. He has never liked me. He has been waiting 4 years for a reason to move against me, and he believes he has found it. He has the votes to call a confidence meeting. He does not have the votes to remove me. Yet. But he has the votes to force me to issue a statement that he dictates. If I do not, he will go to the press ahead of me and say, the board has lost confidence in my personal judgment. He will use the word personal. He will make sure everyone understands what he means. So if you do not throw me out of the story, he throws you out of the company. Approximately. And if you do throw me out of the story, you stay CEO. Yes. Elena. Yeah. If you do what he wants, you are never going to forgive yourself, and you are never going to be the same kind of CEO again. She looked at him for a long time. How do you know that? Because I know what you did in the kitchen at 3 a.m. You told me the truth when you did not have to. A person who does that does not lie to a board the next month to keep her chair. You will lie once. You will hate yourself for it. You will lie twice, hate yourself worse, lie a third time, and by year 2 there will not be anything left of you that is you. I have watched this happen to men I knew in the Marines. It is not a moral problem. It is a mechanical one. It happens the same way every time. She did not answer for a while. She looked at the cold fireplace. I'm going to call Jim, she said, and then I'm going to call Victor Lane. What are you going to tell Victor Lane? I'm going to tell him I will have a statement for him by Friday. That is not what he wants. No, but that is what he is going to get, because I do not work for Victor Lane. I work for the company, and the company pays me to make decisions that are right, not decisions that are fast. Elena. Yeah, there is a version of you that I am starting to like very much. She looked at him. Her eyes were tired and bright at the same time. There's a version of me I'm starting to like very much too, she said. I was not sure there was one. He stood up. He did not touch her. He did not reach for her. He did not do any of the things the tabloid would have wanted to take a picture of. He just stood up and he said, I'm going to go find my daughter. And he went. He found Sophie in the kitchen, where she had climbed up on the stool and was now attempting, with Ms. Bellamy's permission and under Ms. Bellamy's close supervision, to crack an egg into a glass bowl. She was doing it with the concentration of a surgeon. The first egg had not gone well. There were shells in the bowl. Ms. Bellamy was not correcting her. Ms. Bellamy was pretending not to have noticed. Daniel stood in the doorway for a second and watched, and he understood, in that second, something about Ms. Bellamy that he had not understood before, which was that she had raised other people's children her whole life and had learned how to let them fail without shame. Hey, kid. Dad. How is the egg situation? Bad? Want help? No. Okay. He sat at the counter on the stool next to her, and he watched her try again. The second egg was better. She got most of it into the bowl. She fished out the shell with her small fingers and dropped it into a bowl that Miss Bellamy had discreetly placed at her elbow. She did not say anything about it. Neither did he. Neither did Miss Bellamy. Sophie? Yeah. Do you like it here? She thought about it. She was cracking a third egg. She did better this one. She was getting the hang. I like it today? What does that mean? It means I like it today. I don't know if I will like it tomorrow. What would make you not like it tomorrow? If Ms. Bellamy went away, or if the guy with the keys went away, or if Elena was mean. Has Elena ever been mean? No. But I've only been here 4 times, Dad. You cannot tell if a grown-up is mean in 4 times. Daniel laughed. He put his forehead down on the cool marble of the counter for a second. How long does it take to tell? 8 times usually, sometimes 12. If they are good at hiding it, like Mr. Brewer at school, 15. Who is Mr. Brewer at school? The gym teacher. He seems nice, but he yells at the kids who cannot run fast. I figured him out in 15. Emma figured him out in 6, but Emma is very fast. Noted. She went back to her eggs. Miss Bellamy met his eyes across the island and raised her eyebrows very slightly. He nodded. Later, when Sophie was in the sitting room off the kitchen watching a cooking show with Miss Bellamy's approval, Daniel walked down the corridor toward the east wing, and he stopped in the empty room that Elena had asked him to describe. The library. The floor was not yet in. The walls were still bare. The light was coming in through the long windows the same way it had come in the first time, and he stood in the middle of the empty room and he put his hands in his back pockets, and he tried to imagine Sophie on the wood floor with a book open on her stomach, and he could imagine it clear as a picture. And he could also imagine her in a 3-bedroom house in Colorado on a rug in front of a wood stove, and he could imagine her there just as clearly. Both pictures were real to him. Both pictures were possible. He stood there for maybe 10 minutes, and he did not decide anything. Jim Hollister's plane landed at 9:40 the next morning at a small regional airport 40 miles from the estate, and the driver took Daniel out to meet him in a diner off the interstate called the Blue Barn, because Daniel had asked to meet somewhere that was not the Voss property and not any place Elena had ever been. Jim Hollister was 61 years old. He was a tall, heavy, sun-ruined man in a plaid flannel shirt and work jeans and boots that had seen more weather than most people's houses. He was sitting in a booth when Daniel walked in, and he did not stand up. He lifted a coffee cup at Daniel and said, "You Reeves?" "I am." "Sit down." Daniel sat down. The waitress brought him coffee without being asked. Jim Hollister looked at him over the rim of his own cup for about 10 seconds. Daniel looked back. Neither of them blinked. "Elena tells me you fixed her whole damn house with a piece of wire." Elena is generous. Elena is not generous. Elena is precise. If she said wire, it was wire. It was wire. What gauge? 12 solid copper. Jim grunted. Approval, maybe just a grunt. "She also tells me you were a Marine." "I was." "How long?" 4 years, got out honorable, did not re-up." "Why?" "I was better alone." Jim Hollister nodded slowly. He took another sip. "Tell me about your kid." "Her name is Sophie. She is 7. She lost her mother 2.5 years ago. She is smart. She is not afraid of grown-ups. She is picky about food. She has no people skills, but she has a very good character judgment system that seems to kick in around the 8th time she meets a person." Jim Hollister actually smiled at that. It was a small smile, about 1/8 of a smile, but it was real. "My granddaughter is 8. She lives on the property with my son. They got 3 dogs. Girl would have other kids to run around with. School bus goes right past the gate." "Mr. Hollister." Jim, I'm going to be honest with you." "I was hoping you would be." "I do not know yet if I am coming. I came to meet you because Elena asked me to, and because I wanted to know if this was a real thing or a story somebody made up to move me out of the way." "It is a real thing. I can see that. I have known you 5 minutes, and I can already see that. But I do not know yet if I am coming, and I wanted to tell you that to your face because you got on a plane for this." Jim Hollister looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Son, I got on a plane because Elena asked me to. I have known that woman since she was 6 years old. Her daddy was my best friend. I was there the day her daddy died, and I was there at the funeral, and I was there for the 2 years after when she would not answer the phone for anybody on earth. And she answered my phone about once every 4 months because I am the only son of a bitch on that board she actually trusts. And the reason she trusts me is that I never wanted anything from her, including her money, including her time, including her approval." He took another sip. "So when Elena calls me at 7 in the morning and says, 'Jim, I have a man, and I need you to look at him and tell me if he is who I think he is,' I get on a plane. That is the whole reason I am here. You are not wasting my time. I would be on this plane for her if you did not exist." Daniel did not answer for a second. He looked at the man across the table from him. He thought about the way Elena had described him. A friend of mine. Legitimate. Quiet. The simplest word she had used in the whole conversation yesterday. "What do you see?" Daniel said. "I see a man who does not lie and does not want to." "That is a low bar." "Son, you would be surprised how few of you there are." "People keep telling me that." "Keep believing them. They sat there for a while. Daniel ate some eggs. Jim ate a whole country breakfast. They talked about nothing for 20 minutes. They talked about trucks, and about the difference between winter in New England and winter in Colorado, and about how Jim's wife had been dead for 11 years, and about how Sophie had lost her mother, and about how grief did not work the way anybody said it worked. It worked the way the weather worked. You could not schedule it. At the end, Jim Hollister said, "Here is the job. Take it or do not take it. I want an answer by Monday. If you take it, you move by the 15th of next month. If you do not, no hard feelings. And do not ever tell Elena I said this, but I think you belong in that town of mine more than you belong in that big old mausoleum she lives in. And I am not saying that to poach you. I am saying that because you look like a man who needs a yard." Jim: "Yeah. Can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Why did she send me to you instead of just firing me and calling it clean?" Jim looked at him for a long, careful moment. "Son, yeah. You want me to answer that, or you want to answer it yourself?" "I want you to answer it." "All right." He leaned back in the booth. He put both hands around the coffee cup. "Because Elena Voss has been alone since she was 27. I do not mean romantically alone. I mean alone in the way that matters. Her daddy died on her. Her mother died on her when she was 16. She has a half-brother who has been trying to take the company from her since the day the will was read. She trusts about 4 people on earth. I am one. Harold is another. You would not know the other 2. And 2 weeks ago, she called me up and she talked for 11 minutes about a handyman and a 7-year-old, and she told me the girl said the house was too big, and I could hear in her voice that she was thinking about that sentence the way people think about sentences that matter to them, and I knew then she was in trouble. In trouble. In love. We're close enough to it that the difference does not matter for our purposes." Daniel looked at his hands. "She is not in love with me, Jim. She has known me 4 weeks. She is not in love with you. You are correct. She is in love with the idea of a world where a person says a thing to her and means it. She has not lived in that world since she was a little girl. You showed up at her house in a truck with a dent, and you fixed a machine, and you did not try to steal from her, and you told her your daughter had a 3 o'clock pickup, and she has been trying to figure out how to keep you in the general vicinity ever since. By sending me to Colorado, by sending you somewhere where you can have a life, because she knows if you stay in that house, she will eventually ruin you. That is the part she told me herself. She said, 'Jim, I cannot ask him to stay because this house eats people, and it would eat him, and it would eat the little girl.' She said, I need somewhere he can be, where he can still answer the phone when I call, and where his kid can have a yard. And I said, well, I got a yard." Daniel put his forehead in his hand for a second. He sat like that for about 10 seconds. "Jim." "Yeah. I'm going to take the job." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm going to take it, for the kid, for the yard." "Monday, son. Give me until Monday. Sleep on it. Talk to your daughter. Do not say yes to me in a diner on the morning of the worst news cycle of your life. That is not a decision, that is a panic." "Okay?" "I mean it." "Okay, Jim." "Also, one more thing." "Yeah. Do not tell Elena I said any of that about her being alone and about her being in love." "I will not." "She would fire me. I mean that. She would fire me off the board tomorrow morning, and she would be right to." "I will not tell her." Jim Hollister put a 20 on the table for the breakfast he had not paid for yet, and he stood up, and he was even taller when he stood up than he had looked sitting down. He clapped Daniel on the shoulder once, hard, and he said, "Monday." And he walked out of the diner, and his plane was back in the air by noon. Daniel sat in the booth for another 20 minutes by himself. He drank his coffee. He paid the check. He walked out to the sedan. In the car, on the way back, he did not talk to the driver. He looked out the window, and he watched the highway go by, and he thought about Sarah, and he thought about what Sarah would say. Sarah would say, "You go to Colorado, stupid. You take the yard. You take the school. You take the job that pays well, and you do not owe anything to anybody. That is the whole decision." But Sarah would also say, and here was the other thing, Sarah would also say, "Tell her before you go, Daniel. Tell her what she was to you. Don't walk out of her house without telling her. You spent 2 years not telling me things at the end, and I forgave you for it, but do not do it again to anyone else. Do not make that mistake twice." He got back to the estate at 1:30. Elena was not there. She was in Manhattan. in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building with her name on the lobby, and she was in the middle of the worst meeting of her life. It was Victor Lane and 5 other board members around a polished table. She was alone on her side. She had flown in on her own plane that morning after watching, from her office window at 6 a.m., the car take Daniel to meet Jim. She had not slept at all. Her hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it gave her a headache, and she was wearing a navy suit that she had bought 6 years ago for her father's funeral and had never worn since, and she had chosen it on purpose. Victor Lane was 73. He had the kind of face that had been handsome once and had turned into a weapon later. He looked at her across the table and he said, "Elena, we appreciate you coming in on short notice." "Thank you, Victor. We have reviewed the materials. We have spoken to counsel. We are prepared to vote today on a formal statement of no confidence in your personal conduct, unless you are prepared to issue the statement we provided yesterday." "I am not prepared to issue that statement. You understand the consequences." "I understand the consequences." One of the other board members, a woman named Harriet Chen, who had been on the board for 11 years and had never once voted against Elena and had never once voted for her either, leaned forward. Harriet said, "Elena, may I ask something? Please. Is the relationship real?" Elena looked at her. Elena did not answer for about 5 seconds. Then she said, "Define real. Are you sleeping with him?" "No." "Are you in love with him?" Elena opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. "I do not know," she said. "I know I have asked a 7-year-old's opinion about a library. I know I flew a friend of mine in from Colorado this morning to give the girl's father a better job than I can offer him, because I think he deserves a life I cannot give him. I know I have not slept in 40 hours because I am afraid he is going to leave, and I know I am not going to stop him if he does. That is what I know. Whether that is love or something else, Harriet, I do not know." Harriet Chen sat back in her chair. She looked at Victor Lane. Then she looked at Elena. "I am going to vote against the no confidence motion," Harriet said, "if it comes to a vote today." Victor Lane's jaw tightened. "Harriet." "Victor, this is not the time for sentiment." "This is not sentiment. This is the first honest answer she has given this board in 4 years. I am not voting against her for telling the truth in this room for the first time. I am not going to be that person, Victor, and neither are you, if you think about it for 10 seconds. Another board member, a man named Allen, cleared his throat. "I would also like to hear more before we vote." Victor looked around the table. He counted. He was a man who had been counting votes his whole life. He counted 3 sure no's, 2 maybes, and 1 yes. He needed 4 yeses to force the statement. He did not have them. He took a breath. He composed his face. "We will reconvene Friday morning," he said. "Elena, I expect a statement by end of business Thursday. A statement you are prepared to give. I do not care what it says. I care that it exists and that it is yours. Is that understood?" "Understood." Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out. Harriet Chen was the last to leave. She stopped next to Elena's chair. She put one hand briefly on Elena's shoulder, and she did not say anything, and she walked out. Elena sat alone in the conference room for a long time. The windows looked out on the city. She did not look at them. She looked at her hands on the polished table. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Met Jim. Good man. Thinking. That was all." She read it 3 times. She put the phone down. She put her hands flat on the table. She inhaled for a count of 4. She exhaled for a count of 6. Her therapist, whom she had stopped seeing 11 months ago, had taught her that. Then Elena Voss, who had never in her adult life written a sentence in her own hand when she could dictate one, picked up a pen that one of the board members had left on the table, and she pulled a piece of hotel stationery toward her from a stack in the center of the table, and she began to write a statement. Not the one Victor Lane wanted. A different one. She wrote for 22 minutes. She wrote slowly. She crossed out more than she kept. When she was done, she folded the paper in half, and she put it in the inside pocket of her suit jacket, and she left the building, and she got in the car, and she said to the driver, "Home. The estate. Not the city apartment. The estate." "Yes, Miss Voss." The car pulled away from the curb. Elena leaned her head back against the leather seat. She closed her eyes. The driver did not speak to her for the 2 hours and 40 minutes it took to get home. When she got back to the estate, it was almost 7 in the evening. She walked up the stone steps in heels because she had not had a chance to change. and her feet hurt, and she came into the foyer and she took the heels off right there, and she left them on the marble floor, and she walked in stocking feet down the east corridor, past her office, past the room that was going to be the library, all the way to the kitchen, and Daniel was sitting at the island. Sophie was asleep in the next room on a couch, with a blanket over her and a book open on her chest, and Ms. Bellamy in a chair next to her reading something of her own. The whole scene had a stillness in it that Elena did not have a word for. Daniel looked up when Elena came in. Hey, how did it go? I did not make the statement they wanted. I heard. From who? Harold. Harold hears everything 90 minutes before the rest of the world. She nodded. She pulled out the stool across from him and sat on it. She put the folded paper on the island between them. What is that? He said. The statement I am going to make on Thursday. Can I read it? Not yet. Okay. Daniel. Yeah. Did you take the job? He did not answer for a second. Tell me about the statement first. No, tell me about the job first. They sat there. Neither one of them looked away from the other. The kitchen was dim. The only light was the one under the cabinets. In the other room, Sophie turned over in her sleep and the book slid off her chest, and Miss Bellamy reached down and caught it before it hit the floor. I told Jim I was taking it, Daniel said. Elena's face did not change. She had known. She had known since his text in the car. She nodded once, slowly, and she looked down at the folded paper on the island. Okay, she said. I told him I would give him a final answer Monday. He told me to sleep on it. That is like Jim. But I told him I was taking it, Elena. I told him out loud. I made a decision in a diner off the interstate while he was putting a 20 on the table for breakfast, and I got in the car after, and I drove 40 miles home, and every one of those 40 miles, I was already packing. She was quiet. And then I got here, he said, and Sophie was in the other room with Miss Bellamy, and she was asleep on a couch with a book on her chest, in a house she has been in a handful of times, and she was asleep, Elena. She was asleep in a house that is not hers. Sophie does not sleep outside of our apartment. She did not sleep at Mrs. Alvarez's the one time I tried. She cried for 3 hours until I picked her up. I came in here and she was asleep. Elena looked at him. What are you telling me, Daniel? I'm telling you that I made a decision in a diner, and then I walked into this kitchen, and the decision was not as easy as I thought it was. That is what I'm telling you. Read the statement. Elena, read it. Then tell me what you want to do. Do not decide in the other order. Read it first. She slid the paper across the island. He picked it up. He unfolded it. The paper was hotel stationery, a little wrinkled from her pocket. Her handwriting was not what he had expected. He had expected something tight, thin, controlled. Her handwriting was round and a little messy and slanted hard to the right. The handwriting of a person who had learned to write fast in school and had never slowed down. There were cross-outs, whole lines crossed out. Some of the cross-outs had been crossed out themselves. She had written the statement and argued with herself on the page, and he could see every step of the argument. He read it. Then he read it again, slower. He set it down on the island between them. Elena. Yeah. You're going to burn the whole thing down with this. Maybe. They're going to move against you on Friday. They're going to move against me regardless. At least this way, I get to choose the version of me that loses. Who have you shown this to? You. That is it. No lawyers, no head of communications. You. Why me? Because I wrote it for a person who does not know how to lie. I wanted that person to be the first one to read it, to tell me if any of it was a lie. None of it is a lie. You are sure? None of it is a lie, Elena. That is the problem with it. Yes. He sat back on the stool. He looked at the paper again. He could see 3 or 4 sentences, even from a distance, upside down, that he knew by heart already, after one reading. One of them said, "The man in the photograph is not my secret. He is a person I respect, and the image misrepresents him more than it misrepresents me." Another said, "I do not apologize for standing on a terrace at dusk and talking to someone honestly. I will not apologize for it tomorrow. I will not apologize for it a year from now." The last line said, "If the people who have trusted me with this company believe that honest conversation disqualifies a chief executive, I will step down without a fight, but I will not lie to keep my seat." He folded the paper back up. He pushed it gently back across the island to her. Do not change a word of it. Daniel, do not change a word of it. Do not let a lawyer change a word of it. Do not let your head of communications change a word of it. Read it on Thursday the way it is written, every comma, every cross out. Read it out loud. Let people hear you think. Okay. Elena. Yeah. I'm not going to Colorado. She did not move. She did not even look up. She was looking at the paper in her hands, and he could see her jaw work once, and then she set the paper down very carefully, and she looked at him. Daniel. No. Yes. Do not do this because of the statement. I did not write the statement to keep you here. I wrote it because I am not going to lie in front of a board of old men for my chair. Those are two different things. Those are not the same thing. Do you understand? I understand. Then go to Colorado. No. Daniel. Elena, let me talk. Okay. I was in the car on the way back from meeting Jim. I was thinking about my wife. I do that a lot. I do not tell people, but I do. I was thinking about what she would say. And for a long time on that drive, she was telling me to go. Take the yard, take the school, take the job. You do not owe anything to anybody. And I was listening. I was going to listen. I was 10 miles out from this house, and I was still listening. What changed? I came in here and my daughter was asleep in a room she barely knows. And I thought about the thing Jim said to me at the end of breakfast. He said Sophie would have other kids to run around with on his property. 3 dogs, a granddaughter her age, a school bus. And that is a good life. I believed him. I still believe him. But Elena, my daughter, has been sleeping through the night for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks. She has not slept through the night since her mother died. Do you know when she started? Oh. No. The week she met Ms. Bellamy. Elena closed her eyes for a second. That is not me, Daniel. That is Ms. Bellamy. You can take Miss Bellamy to Colorado. I will pay her salary. She will go. She adores the child. I know you would. I know she might. That is not the point. The point is that there is a specific world my daughter has relaxed into, and that world includes a kitchen and a woman who bakes and a man with keys who nods at her seriously when she says something smart, and a room with nothing in it that is going to be a library with a ladder on wheels. It includes a woman who knelt on stone steps to shake her hand and told her the house was too big. I take her out of that, Elena, and I'm asking her to start over somewhere else. And I have asked her to start over twice in her life already. And she is 7 years old, and I am not asking her a third time if I do not have to. You do have to. Why? Because if you stay, this never stops. There will be another photograph in 6 months, a different angle, a different kid with a phone, and next time they will get her face. Then we will deal with that then. Daniel, Elena, listen to me. I am listening. If I go to Colorado, I am running. I've done enough running. I ran when Sarah got sick, and I kept working when I should have stopped. I ran when she died, and I signed up for every repair job in 3 counties so I would not have to be in the apartment. I have been running for 2.5 years, and I am tired. I am not running again. Not from a tabloid. Not from a board. Not from the possibility that some coward with a camera is going to photograph my kid. I will protect her. I will not run. Mom, Mom, Alon. Daniel. And there is something else. What? I'm not going to Colorado because if I go to Colorado, I'm going to spend the next 10 years thinking about this kitchen and about a woman who flew a friend of hers in from 12,000 acres because she thought I deserved a better life than she could give me. I'm going to think about that every night at dinner, and I do not want to do that to myself. I do not want to do that to whoever I meet next. I do not want to do that to Sophie. I do not want to be the man who runs from something real because real is harder than a yard. Elena put her hands flat on the island. She looked down at them. Her knuckles were white. You have known me 4 weeks, she said. I know. You do not know me. I know some of you. The part I know, I am not running from. Daniel, I am not a good person. I am not a kind person. I am a person who has been alone for a long time and who has gotten used to being alone and who has built a whole life around being alone. And I do not know if I can stop. I am telling you this now because I should have told you this 3 weeks ago, and I did not.
Because I liked having you in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, and I was selfish about it, and I should not have been. Elena, I am not finished. Okay, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm going to work too many hours. I'm going to forget things. I'm going to forget birthdays. I'm going to miss dinners. I'm going to take a call in the middle of a movie with your daughter, and she is going to look at me the way every person in my life has looked at me for 9 years, which is the look of a person who has figured out that they are not the most important thing to me. And she is 7, Daniel.
She has already lost one person who was supposed to be the most important thing. I do not get to be the second person who teaches her that lesson. That would break her. I am not going to do it. Then do not do it. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Do not do it. Do not miss dinners. Do not take the call during the movie. You are not a machine. You are a woman who made a decision today to tell the truth in a conference room instead of lie. That is a decision. You can make more of them. Daniel, I'm telling you, you are not fixed. You can change. I have watched you change in 4 weeks. You used to wear shoes, Elena. You do not wear shoes anymore in this house. That is a change. She made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else. That is not a change. That is a symptom. Of what? Of being tired of the shoes. That is exactly what I mean. They sat there for a long time without talking. The light under the cabinets buzzed faintly. In the other room, Ms. Bellamy had gotten up quietly and laid a second blanket over Sophie and sat back down. And she was pretending to read, and she was actually listening through the doorway, and she was not sorry about it, and neither of them had heard her move. Elena. Yeah. There is one more thing. What? Sophie woke up in the car on the way back from Mrs. Alvarez's yesterday. She asked me if you were mean. I told her no. She said she had only met you 4 times and she could not tell in 4 times. She said she usually needs 8, sometimes 12. Elena almost smiled. And we are on 5, Elena. We are going into the 6th. She is going to decide about you in the next 3 weeks whether I stay or go. If I take her to Colorado, she never finishes deciding. She will wonder about you for the rest of her life. She will wonder if you were mean or not. She deserves the answer. Daniel, that is the worst reason you have given me yet. I know. It is also the truest. Elena looked at him. She was crying, a little. Not much. 2 tears, and she did not wipe them, because if she wiped them, she would admit they were there. She let them sit on her face. What are you going to tell Jim? I'm going to tell him no, and I'm going to tell him thank you, and I'm going to ask him to keep the job open in case I am wrong about this in 6 months and I have to come to him with my tail between my legs. He will. I know. Daniel. Yeah. I am afraid. I know. I am afraid of you. I am afraid of your daughter. I am afraid of being the person you think I can be. I'm afraid of how much I already thought about your daughter this morning at 6 a.m. when I was watching a car take you to a diner. I should not have been thinking about a 7-year-old at 6 a.m. in the middle of the worst crisis of my career. I should have been thinking about my statement. I was thinking about whether she slept through the night, because you told me once she does not, and I was thinking about whether Ms. Bellamy's cinnamon rolls had helped. That is where my mind was, Daniel. That is not the mind of a CEO. That is the mind of a person who is about to get hurt. Machis. Yes. Do not be cruel about this with me. I am not being cruel. I am agreeing. You're about to get hurt. So am I. So is Sophie. That is the whole deal. We are all going to get hurt a little, and we are going to do it anyway. She put her face in her hands for a minute. He did not move. He did not try to touch her. He had not touched her once in 4 weeks, and he was not going to start now. When she took her hands away from her face, she looked at him, and she said, Thursday is the board call. I know. I'm going to read the statement. I know. After I read it, I do not know what happens. We find out together. Daniel. Yeah. Do not say that word like that. What word? Together. Why not? Because I'm going to remember you said it, and if you leave, I am going to remember you said it, and it is going to cost me. I am not leaving. You might. I might. I am also not planning to. Okay. Okay. She stood up from the stool. She picked up the statement. She folded it again and put it back in the inside pocket of her jacket. I'm going to bed, she said. Not to sleep, to lie down. I have not lain down in 40 hours. Okay. Your daughter can stay. Miss Bellamy will put her in the guest room at the end of the east corridor. It is a warm room. It is already made up. Thank you. I did not do it for you. I know. She walked out of the kitchen in her stocking feet, and she did not look back. And Daniel watched her go until she was around the corner, and then he put his elbows on the island, and he put his face in his palms, and he stayed like that for about 30 seconds. Then he got up, and he went into the other room, and Miss Bellamy was there with her book open on her lap, not reading, and she looked up at him and she said, "You are a fool." I know. A fool who made the right call. I hope so. Sit down. I have coffee. Ms. B, I have not slept either. That is why you need the coffee. He sat down in the chair opposite her, across from the couch where Sophie was sleeping under 2 blankets now, and Ms. Bellamy poured him coffee from a thermos at her elbow that he had not noticed, and he drank it, and she watched him drink it, and when he was halfway through, she said, "That woman is going to put her whole life on a table Thursday." You were listening. Every word. Ms. B. Don't Ms. B me. I have been in this house 19 years. I listen to everything. I keep my mouth shut about most of it. I am not keeping my mouth shut about this. Okay? She is going to read that paper, and the men on that board are going to tear her apart, and she is going to sit there and let them, because she has decided that is the price of being able to look at you in the morning without flinching. You hear me? I hear you. Then you be there on Thursday, Daniel Reeves. You be at that meeting, not in the room. She will not let you in the room. But you be in the building. You be on the floor. You be where she can see you when she walks out. Because that woman is going to walk out of that room wrecked, and the first face she sees is the face she is going to believe. If the first face is Harold, she will believe he is paid to be kind to her. If the first face is her lawyer, she will believe he is paid too. If the first face is yours, she will believe you. He looked at Miss Bellamy. He set the coffee down. You have thought about this. I have thought about this since the night she gave your daughter that bowl. Miss B. Thursday, Daniel. You be there Thursday. I will. Bring the child, not in the room, in the building, on the floor. The child has a way of being in a place that makes a room less cruel. You know what I mean. I know what you mean. Good. He finished the coffee. Sophie slept on. The book on her chest had slid off again and was open on the blanket, and he picked it up and he marked her page with a bookmark made out of a napkin, and he set it on the side table, and he kissed his daughter on the side of her head. Thursday was 2 days away. He was not going to sleep either. Elena read the statement in front of 14 people in a boardroom on the 42nd floor at 2 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. She read it standing up, which was not a thing she did at board meetings. She had always sat, and she read it in the shoes she had kicked off in the foyer of the estate the night Daniel told her he was not going to Colorado, because she had gone back and picked them up in the morning, and she had put them on purpose. She read it the way Daniel had told her to read it. Every comma, every cross-out, every word she had argued with herself about. When she finished, there was a long silence, longer than was comfortable. Victor Lane was red in the face. Harriet Chen was very still. A man at the end of the table, whose name Elena had not remembered for 6 years, had tears in his eyes, which surprised her, and she made a note to learn his name again. Victor Lane cleared his throat and said, "I move for a vote of no confidence." Harriet Chen said, "I move to table the motion indefinitely." Another board member seconded Harriet, then another, then slowly 2 more. The motion to table passed 7-5. Victor Lane did not have the votes. He had miscounted. He looked at Elena across the table, and his face did something that she had wanted to see on his face since she was 27 years old. And he stood up, and he left the room, and he did not come back. And 2 weeks later, he resigned from the board by letter. Elena walked out of the conference room. Her lawyers were in the hallway. Her head of communications was in the hallway. 3 of her vice presidents were in the hallway. She walked past all of them. She walked to the elevator and she went down to the lobby. And when the elevator opened, Daniel Reeves was standing near the front desk, with a small girl in a red coat next to him, and the girl was holding her father's hand. And she was looking at Elena with the face of a person who was around number 6 or 7 and still deciding. Elena crossed the lobby. Her heels made sharp, quick sounds on the marble. She did not look at anyone else. She got to Daniel. She stopped in front of him. She did not say anything for a second. Then Sophie let go of her father's hand and she reached up and she tugged on the sleeve of Elena's jacket. And Elena bent down the way she had bent down on the front steps. And Sophie said, in a small, serious voice, "I decided." "Decided what?" "You are not mean." Elena inhaled once, sharply. "Thank you, Sophie." "You're welcome." Sophie stepped back. She took her father's hand again. Elena straightened up. She looked at Daniel. Her eyes were wet. She did not try to hide it this time. "They tabled it," she said. "I heard. I do not know what happens next. Neither do I." "Daniel." "Yeah. I do not want to do this alone anymore." "Then do not." "Okay." "Okay." She put her hand out. Not for his hand. Just out, the way a person puts their hand out in a room they do not quite trust yet to feel the air. He took it. He did not shake it. He just held it, and she held his back. And across the lobby, a security guard who had been about to ask them to move along changed his mind and looked at the floor. Outside, a car was waiting. The three of them walked out of the building together, and nobody took a picture of them. And if somebody had, it would not have mattered, because there was nothing in the picture anymore that Elena Voss or Daniel Reeves needed to hide. The car took them back to the estate, and by the time they pulled through the gate, it was already dusk. The kind of dusk that softens a house like that one and makes it look, for a few minutes, almost like a place a person could live in. Sophie had fallen asleep with her cheek against the window, and Daniel carried her inside, and Elena walked ahead of them in her shoes and then took them off in the foyer again and left them where they landed, and nobody picked them up this time. The shoes stayed there until morning. The first real change was small. Elena stopped answering her phone after 8, not because someone told her to, because one Tuesday night she was reading to Sophie on the couch, in the sitting room off the kitchen, a book about a rabbit that was afraid of the dark. The same book Daniel had read the night he brought the $25,000 home in a manila envelope. And her phone rang. And Sophie looked at her, and Elena looked at the phone. And she picked it up, and she muted it, and she set it face down on the side table, and she kept reading. That was all. Nobody gave a speech about it. Sophie did not notice. Daniel noticed from across the room, and he did not say anything. And later, when Sophie was asleep, he did not mention it either, because he had learned by then that the worst thing you can do to a person who is changing is praise them for it. Praise makes change self-conscious. He let her change in the dark. The library got built. The floor went in and it was wood, and Sophie ran across it in socks the first day it was finished, and she slid about 4 feet and fell on her back and laughed. And Elena laughed too, standing in the doorway with a coffee in her hand, and Daniel stood behind her and watched the two of them, and he thought about Sarah, and he did not push the thought away. He let it sit. Sarah would have liked Elena, he thought. Sarah would have liked her not because she was kind, but because she was honest, and Sarah had not put up with anything else. The marriage happened in the library a year and a half later. It was 11 people. Ms. Bellamy made a cake that had too much rum in it. Harold cried, which nobody had ever seen him do, and which he denied afterwards. Jim Hollister flew in from Colorado and brought his granddaughter, and Sophie and the granddaughter stayed up past midnight planning a treehouse that they never built and did not need to. Sophie walked Elena down the aisle, which was not an aisle. It was just the space between the 2 old chairs Daniel had asked for in the beginning. She held Elena's hand the whole way. At the end of it, she put Elena's hand into her father's, and she stepped back. And Daniel said what he wanted to say, which was short, and Elena said what she wanted to say, which was shorter. And she did not cry because she had decided in advance she was not going to cry, and she cried anyway, and it was fine. They had another daughter 3 years after that. They named her Sarah, and Sophie had picked the name, and nobody had argued because there had not been anything to argue about. Elena stepped down as CEO when the younger girl was 2. She took a board seat and a title that let her choose her hours, and some people in the financial papers wrote that she had lost her edge, and some people wrote that she had found something else. And she did not read either kind of story. Daniel fixed things around the house. He still carried the blue-handled screwdriver. He still woke up at strange hours, but not because he could not sleep. Because a child had climbed into their bed, or because a dog they had gotten for Sophie had whined at the door, or because Elena had rolled over and said something into the dark, and he had answered her. If there was a lesson in any of it, it was not a clean one, because clean lessons are for the kind of stories that do not happen to real people. The lesson, if it was a lesson at all, was this. A person can spend a whole life running from the next hard thing, and the running looks from the outside like survival, and sometimes it is. But there comes a point where running stops being survival and starts being the thing that kills you slowly. And the only way out is to plant your feet in front of somebody who can see you and tell them the truth, and let them tell you the truth back, and then stand there while both of you decide whether you can bear it. Elena had spent 9 years being the richest lonely person she knew. Daniel had spent 2.5 years keeping his hands busy so his heart would not catch up to him. They met in a server room. She was barefoot. He had copper wire in his pocket. Neither one of them was anything like the person the other one needed. And that was the whole point, because the people we think we need are usually the people we have decided we deserve. And sometimes the ones we actually get are better than the ones we would have drawn up, because they do not know the script, and they do not try to play a part. And they just show up on a Monday morning with a toolbox and a 7-year-old who thinks your house is too big, and they stay.